She was sold into a marriage she feared. The cowboy whispered, "I'll wait for your heart." Amara sat on the edge of her small wooden bed, staring at the worn floorboards. The morning sunlight streamed weakly through the thin curtains, falling on her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart felt heavy, and an uneasy tension coiled in her chest. Today was the day her life would change forever, and not in a way she had chosen. She had heard whispers about this for weeks, felt the tension in her parents' voices, and seen the hurried meetings that she was deliberately excluded from. Her father had been quiet lately, his brow furrowed as if carrying the weight of the world, and her mother had a sad, distant look that made Amara's stomach twist. Her parents were kind people in their way, but they were trapped by the demands of their small town and the traditions that ruled it. Families were expected to secure alliances, strengthen social ties, and ensure stability through marriages that were often arranged rather than chosen. Amara understood this, but knowing did nothing to ease the cold fear that gripped her now. She was only 19, with dreams of exploring the world, learning new things, and choosing her own path. None of that mattered here. Her future had been decided for her. A soft knock came at her door. "Amara, breakfast is ready," her mother said. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. Amara nodded but did not move immediately. She wanted to hold on to this room, to the small space where she had felt some control over her life. The thought of leaving it for a stranger, someone she was expected to love because of duty, made her chest tighten even more. Downstairs, the breakfast table was neatly set. The scent of fresh bread and butter filled the room, but Amara barely noticed. Her father sat at the head of the table, his face calm but serious. He placed a hand over hers briefly, a gesture of reassurance, though it offered little comfort. "Amara," he began, his voice steady, "you know why we must do this. The arrangement has been made with the Miller family. Their son is a good man, and this will secure our family's future." Amara nodded, forcing herself to speak. "I know, Father." "But—" her voice trailed off. Words failed her. How could she explain the fear that had taken root in her chest, the sense of losing herself before she had even begun to live? Her mother reached out and squeezed her hand. "We are doing what we believe is best, my dear. We only want you to have a secure life." Secure. The word felt cold and empty. She wanted more than security. She wanted choice, freedom, and love that she could feel, not just perform. After breakfast, her father helped her pack a small bag. She filled it with a few clothes, her journal, and the small trinkets she had collected over the years. Each item she touched carried memories, fragments of a life she was leaving behind. Her room felt emptier as she packed, the walls echoing with the laughter and quiet moments of her youth. By mid-morning, the carriage was ready outside. The town had gathered in small clusters, curious eyes following her every movement. Amara climbed in quietly, avoiding the gaze of the neighbors who nodded politely, but with an undercurrent of judgment. She could feel their expectations pressing down on her like a heavy cloak. The journey to the Miller Ranch was long and quiet. The countryside stretched endlessly, golden fields waving in the wind, distant hills rising gently on the horizon. Amara tried to focus on the beauty outside, but her mind kept wandering back to the unknown future that awaited her. What would he be like, the man she was to marry? Would he be kind, cruel, or indifferent? Could she endure a life built on duty rather than affection? When the carriage finally pulled up to the ranch, Amara's anxiety spiked. The house was large, much bigger than she had imagined, with white wooden walls, a wide porch, and fields stretching far into the distance. The air smelled of hay, earth, and the faint tang of horses. She felt a small pang of envy for the freedom the animals seemed to enjoy, running and grazing without worry. She stepped out, adjusting the strap of her bag, and found herself face to face with Jackson, the young cowboy who worked at the ranch. He was tall and sturdy, with sun-kissed skin and kind eyes that seemed to notice everything. There was no pride or arrogance in his stance, only calm attentiveness. He nodded politely, tipping his hat. "Miss Amara, welcome," he said softly. His voice was gentle, carrying a warmth that made her heart skip slightly. There was something in the way he looked at her, not with judgment, but with understanding. Amara hesitated. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure of what else to say. Jackson smiled faintly, sensing her unease. He didn't try to force a conversation, only stood quietly by her side. Then he leaned slightly closer and whispered, almost as if sharing a secret, "I'll wait for your heart." The word struck Amara unexpectedly.
In that moment, she felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark in the darkness of her fear.
Someone here at least seemed to understand that she was more than a duty, more than a promise. Inside the house, the Miller family welcomed her with polite smiles and formal greetings. Their son, the one she was to marry, appeared distant, polite, but cold. His eyes did not meet hers, and his conversation was brief, leaving her feeling even more isolated. The contrast between him and Jackson was stark, and it only heightened her anxiety. Days passed, and Amara struggled to adjust. The house was grand, but the walls seemed to close in on her. Every corner, every routine reminded her of the life she had lost, and she felt trapped by invisible chains. Jackson, however, remained a constant presence, not intrusive, but quietly supportive. He helped her navigate the ranch, showed her how to care for the animals, and spoke gently about the land and the seasons. Slowly, Amara began to notice small things about Jackson. The way he paused to watch the sunset, the way he listened when she spoke, the patience in his movements. Unlike others, he did not expect anything from her. There was no demand, no expectation, only a calm presence that made her feel a little less alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Amara found herself sitting on the porch, gazing out at the fields. Jackson joined her quietly, leaning against the railing a few feet away. Neither spoke for a long time, only listening to the sounds of the ranch. The soft lowing of cows, the rustle of the wind through the grass, the distant neigh of horses. Finally, Jackson spoke, his voice low and steady. "I know this isn't easy for you."
"I know you feel trapped." Amara's throat tightened.
"I do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I'm losing myself." Jackson nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Then take your time. No one can rush your heart. Not even me. I'll wait. That's a promise." The words, simple and sincere, brought a lump to her throat. For the first time in days, she felt a little lighter, a little safer. Perhaps there was someone who would see her for who she truly was, someone who would respect her fears and her wishes. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the vast sky, Amara lay in the guest room that had been prepared for her. The room was comfortable, but it felt empty without the familiar comforts of her own home. She hugged her knees to her chest, thinking of Jackson's words. A small, cautious hope began to grow inside her. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way for her to navigate this new life without losing herself completely. Outside, the ranch was quiet. The only sounds the soft chirping of crickets and the gentle rustle of the wind. Amara closed her eyes and let herself imagine a future where she could breathe freely, where her heart could choose its own path, and for the first time in a long while she felt a spark of courage flicker within her. A tiny flame that whispered she might survive this, might even find something beautiful amidst the fear. That night, as she drifted into a restless sleep, she held on to Jackson's promise. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if love would ever truly find her in this arranged life, but she knew one thing for certain. Someone was willing to wait for her heart. And in that thought, Amara found a sliver of peace, a sense that she might not be entirely alone in facing the days ahead. The first part of her story ended with uncertainty, yes, but also with a fragile, budding hope. She had been thrust into a world she feared, yet already she had encountered a kindness that made the fear a little less suffocating. And somewhere in the quiet of that ranch, under the endless sky, Amara began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find her place and her heart in a life she had never chosen for herself. Amara woke early the next morning, the sunlight spilling through the window of her guest room. The birds chirped outside, and the soft smell of hay and earth drifted in through the open window. Despite the beauty of the morning, a tight knot of worry sat in her chest. Today would be another day at the ranch, another day of adjusting to a life she had never chosen. She rose quietly, careful not to disturb the room that felt so unfamiliar, and dressed quickly. The house was already stirring when she reached the kitchen. The Miller family had breakfast prepared, but the atmosphere felt stiff and formal. Her intended husband, Robert Miller, sat at the table, polished and polite but distant. He greeted her with a nod, his tone neutral, offering no warmth. Amara felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her, heavier than the morning sunlight. She forced a smile and sat down, knowing that her words and gestures would be judged carefully. After breakfast, she was shown the ranch grounds. The property was vast. Green pastures stretching farther than her eyes could see, barns and stables filled with horses, and fields lined with fences that looked like they had been there for generations. The beauty of it all should have been comforting, but for Amara, it felt like another reminder of the world she had entered unwillingly. Jackson appeared shortly after, as if he had anticipated her need for guidance. He carried a soft, easy presence that made her feel less out of place. "Good morning, Miss Amara," he said with a gentle nod. "I thought I could show you around today, help you get familiar with the ranch." Amara hesitated, but something in his calm voice encouraged her. She nodded, and together they walked across the fields. Jackson pointed out the different horses, explaining their names, habits, and temperaments. He showed her the barn where the cows were milked each morning and the vegetable garden behind the house. He spoke in a way that made every detail feel interesting, yet he never pressured her to do anything before she was ready. "You don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with," he said as they stopped by a small pond where ducks floated lazily. "The ranch has been here for a long time, but it will feel like home only when you are ready." Amara felt a small flicker of gratitude. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with patience and respect. At home, she had been told what to do and how to behave without regard for her feelings. Here, Jackson seemed to understand that she was more than just a guest or a duty to fulfill. Over the next few days, Amara began to adapt slowly. She learned how to feed the animals and tend to the garden. Jackson was always nearby, ready to help when she struggled, but careful never to overstep. His quiet encouragement allowed her to feel some small sense of accomplishment, and she began to take pride in the tasks she once would have feared. Evenings were particularly challenging. The house was large, and the rooms felt cold and unfamiliar. Amara often found herself sitting by the window, looking out at the darkened fields, thinking about the life she had left behind. She missed the laughter of her family, the comfort of familiar rooms, and the freedom to make even the smallest choices. The weight of the arranged marriage pressed heavily on her shoulders, and she often wondered if she would ever truly feel at home here. Jackson seemed to sense her struggles. One evening, as she sat quietly in the garden, he appeared carrying 2 mugs of warm milk. "I thought you might like this," he said, handing one to her. "It's better than nothing after a long day." Amara smiled softly, taking the mug. "Thank you, Jackson. You always know when I need something." He shrugged lightly, his eyes kind. "I just try to pay attention." "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." "I'll be here." The simple words warmed her more than she expected. Jackson did not speak of love or expectation, only of presence and patience. And that, she realized, was a rare gift in a world that demanded so much of her without asking what she wanted. Despite Jackson's kindness, her life at the ranch was not without tension. Robert Miller, her intended husband, remained distant and formal. He expected her to perform her role without complaint, attending social gatherings and helping with household duties. He spoke to her politely but with a firmness that reminded her she had little choice in the matter. Amara often found herself retreating into silence, observing from the edges rather than participating fully. Even the staff seemed to treat her with caution. They were polite, yet their eyes sometimes carried a subtle curiosity, a sense of judgment about her unfamiliarity with ranch life. Amara tried to smile and be patient, but it was exhausting to navigate a place where every action felt scrutinized. Jackson remained her constant. One afternoon, as they walked along a trail leading to a small creek, he spoke quietly. "You're stronger than you think, Miss Amara. I can see it, even when you doubt yourself." Amara looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel like I'm just surviving." "Surviving is the first step to living," he said simply. "You don't have to rush. Life here doesn't have to be perfect right away. Just take it one day at a time." The words comforted her more than she expected. It was the first time someone had acknowledged her feelings without dismissing them or expecting her to conform immediately. She began to trust him, to let him see her uncertainty and fear without judgment. Over time, small moments of joy began to appear in her days. She laughed softly when a mischievous calf ran past her, tripped on its own legs, and stumbled into the mud. She marveled at the colors of the sunset over the fields, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She began to notice the simple beauty in daily routines, the smell of fresh hay, the warmth of the sun on her face, the rhythm of life at the ranch. Jackson was always there, observing silently, offering help when needed, and never rushing her. He never asked her to feel anything she did not, never pressured her to smile or perform for anyone's approval. His patience became a quiet anchor in the swirling uncertainty of her life. One evening, after a particularly long day, they sat together on the porch. The sky was painted in deep purples and golds, and the wind carried the soft scent of earth and growing plants. Amara took a deep breath and spoke softly.
I think I'm starting to understand this place.
"Maybe I can get used to it," Jackson smiled gently. "You don't have to just get used to it. You can make it your own, at your own pace."
I'll be here while you do. Amara felt a warmth she could not explain.
It was not love, not yet. It was trust, and it was comfort. She realized that Jackson had given her something rare, a space to feel safe, to be herself, and to navigate a life she had feared without judgment. The days continued in this rhythm. Amara learned to ride horses under Jackson's guidance, discovering a surprising confidence in her ability to control the animals. She helped with the daily chores, finding small pride in completing tasks that once seemed impossible. Slowly, she began to feel a sense of belonging, though her heart remained cautious, aware of the larger challenges that still lay ahead. Despite the growing connection between her and Jackson, she remained acutely aware of her position. This was still an arranged marriage, and her future was not entirely her own. She could not yet imagine a life where she could freely choose love or happiness. Every day brought a mix of small triumphs and lingering fears, and she learned to navigate them carefully, leaning on Jackson's quiet support whenever she needed it. One afternoon as they worked in the garden, Jackson paused and looked at her with a soft seriousness.
You don't have to be afraid, he said. Whatever happens, I'll wait for your heart.
Always. Amara felt her chest tighten with a strange mix of fear and hope. His promise was simple, yet it carried weight. It meant that she could take her time, that someone cared not just for her presence but for her feelings, her choices, and her pace. It was a comfort she had never known, and it made her feel for the first time that she might survive this arranged life without losing herself entirely. As evening fell, she returned to her room with a quiet sense of calm. The house still felt large and unfamiliar, but she had begun to carve out a small space where she felt safe, a place where she could breathe and begin to find herself again. Jackson's presence had become more than just helpful. It had become a symbol of patience, understanding, and respect in a world that demanded so much too soon. That night as she lay in bed, she thought about the future with cautious hope. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she had learned something important. She could face it one day at a time, and she was not entirely alone. Jackson's promise lingered in her mind, a quiet reassurance that perhaps her heart could still be hers to choose, even in the midst of a life that had been arranged without her consent. And with that thought, Amara drifted into a restless but peaceful sleep, ready to face whatever the next day might bring. The days at the ranch began to feel slightly easier for Amara. She had learned the rhythms of the land, the routines of the animals, and the expectations of the household. Jackson was always nearby, a quiet presence who offered guidance and support without ever pressuring her. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt small sparks of confidence and belonging. Yet beneath these small victories a lingering tension remained. Her arranged husband, Robert, continued to be polite but distant, and she could sense the unspoken expectation that she behave in a way that pleased him and the family. One afternoon, as the sun hung high and bright in the sky, Robert approached Amara with a sharp formality that immediately set her on edge. "You should attend the town meeting tonight," he said, his tone firm. "It is expected that you appear with me. There will be neighbors, family friends, and local officials. You must behave properly." Amara nodded, but her stomach twisted. Social gatherings were always overwhelming, and she had yet to find comfort in these formalities. "I understand," she said softly. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. "I expect no complaints," he added. His words were not cruel, but they were rigid and unyielding, leaving no room for hesitation or refusal. After he walked away, Amara sank onto the porch steps, running her hands through her hair in frustration. The pressure was suffocating. She had begun to feel some sense of ease in her daily routines, but moments like this reminded her how trapped she still was. Jackson appeared quietly beside her, carrying a small basket of fresh fruit. He handed her an apple with a gentle smile. "It seems you have a challenging evening ahead," he said softly. "Do you want to talk about it?" Amara shook her head. "I don't know if talking will help," she whispered. I don't know how to be what he wants me to be." Jackson sat down beside her, leaving space between them. He didn't push her. Instead, he spoke with calm certainty. "You don't have to be what anyone wants. You only need to be yourself. It may take time for others to understand, but your heart is yours alone. And I'll wait for it." The words struck her once again, reminding her of the small but steady thread of hope Jackson had offered from the beginning. She took a deep breath and allowed herself a brief moment of comfort, leaning back against the porch railing as she watched the wind ripple through the fields. That evening, the house buzzed with activity. Servants prepared the finest rooms, polished silverware gleamed on tables, and the smell of roast and fresh bread filled the air. Amara wore the dress she had chosen with care, a soft, pale blue that contrasted with the harsh formality of the gathering. Yet as she followed Robert into the town hall, her heart pounded with anxiety. The room was filled with people she did not know. Conversations flowed around her like a river she could not enter, and all eyes seemed to weigh her carefully. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and intensely aware of every misstep she might make. Robert stood beside her, his posture stiff and commanding. Amara felt a pang of fear. She wanted to retreat, to hide, but she forced herself to stand tall, to take a deep breath, and to follow his lead. She smiled politely when neighbors greeted her, answered questions with measured words, and tried to keep her mind focused on the small details rather than the overwhelming sea of expectations. Jackson, who had accompanied them to the outskirts of the gathering as part of his duties on the ranch, noticed her unease immediately. He offered quiet gestures of reassurance, a nod, a gentle smile, a subtle presence at her side when she needed a moment of grounding. She felt a sense of calm wash over her, knowing that she was not entirely alone in the crowded room. But as the evening progressed, Robert's controlling tendencies became more apparent. He corrected her posture, whispered instructions about how to speak and whom to greet, and subtly criticized her behavior when she deviated from his expectations. Amara's chest tightened with every passing moment. She felt the walls closing in, her freedom shrinking with every pointed suggestion and strict instruction. After what felt like hours, she excused herself, stepping out into the cool night air. The sky was clear, dotted with stars, and the gentle rustle of leaves offered a small respite from the intensity inside. She leaned against the railing of the balcony, letting out a shaky breath, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Jackson appeared quietly, as if he had been waiting for her. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Amara shook her head. "I feel trapped," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I try to follow the rules, to be what they want, but it's too much. I feel like I'm losing myself again." Jackson nodded, his expression full of understanding. "Then let's take a walk," he suggested. "You don't have to face this alone." They walked together along the quiet trails of the ranch, the moonlight casting a silver glow over the fields. Amara spoke quietly, sharing her fears, the feelings she had kept bottled up for weeks. She spoke of the suffocating expectations, the constant scrutiny, and the fear of losing her identity. Jackson listened without interruption, his eyes steady and compassionate. "I never knew it could feel like this," she said finally, her voice soft and raw. "I thought I would be safe here, that maybe life could feel lighter. But every time I try to breathe, it feels like someone is pressing down on me." Jackson stopped walking and faced her. "I understand," he said gently. "It's not fair that you feel this way, but you are stronger than you realize. Even when you feel trapped, even when it seems impossible, you still take steps forward. You face this life, and that shows more courage than most people ever have." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "But I don't know how to make it better. I don't know how to be free from all of this." Jackson reached out and took her hand in his, a simple gesture that carried more weight than words. "You don't have to face it all at once. You can take one step at a time."
And I will be here as long as you need me. Always.
For the first time since she arrived at the ranch, Amara felt a small measure of relief. She realized that she could rely on someone, that she did not have to carry her fears entirely on her own. Jackson's presence offered a kind of safety she had not known was possible. The next few days brought new challenges. Robert's expectations continued to weigh heavily on her, and moments of fear and doubt resurfaced often. But Amara found herself leaning on Jackson more and more, trusting his guidance and comfort. They spent long hours together tending to the animals, walking the fields, and talking quietly about the ranch and its rhythms. One afternoon, while feeding the horses, Amara stumbled, nearly falling. Jackson was immediately at her side, steadying her and offering a reassuring smile. "See? You are learning. You are doing well," he said, his voice calm and encouraging. Amara laughed softly, the sound light and unexpected. "I never thought I could do this," she admitted. "I never thought I could feel even a little confident." Jackson shrugged gently. "You have the strength. You just needed to see it for yourself. And I'll be here, watching you, helping you when you need it. I will wait for your heart, remember?" She nodded, feeling a warmth that went beyond gratitude. It was a quiet, steady connection, one that promised patience, understanding, and trust. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt that perhaps she could navigate this arranged life without losing herself entirely.
But the tension with Robert remained.
One evening, after a particularly strict correction from him, Amara felt the weight of fear and frustration overwhelm her. She excused herself and fled to the outskirts of the ranch, seeking the quiet of the open fields. The night air was cool, and the stars sparkled above, offering a small sense of freedom. Jackson found her there, standing alone by the edge of the pasture. "I thought I might find you here," he said softly. "Are you all right?" Amara shook her head, tears flowing freely now. I can't do this. I can't pretend everything is fine when it's not. I feel like I'm drowning." Jackson stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You don't have to pretend. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. You can feel everything you feel, and you won't face it alone." Amara's voice trembled as she poured out her fears, her uncertainty, and her sense of being trapped. Jackson listened, never interrupting, never judging. He simply offered his presence, his calm steadiness, and his promise to wait for her heart. Finally exhausted but relieved, Amara looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for understanding, for not expecting too much, for being here." Jackson smiled softly. "Always," he said. "I will always be here, for as long as you need. You don't have to rush your heart." For the first time, Amara felt a fragile sense of hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and fears, but she realized that she did not have to face it alone. Jackson's patience and understanding offered a light in the darkness, a reminder that love and support could exist even in the most difficult circumstances. That night, as Amara lay in her room, she thought about the future with cautious optimism. She did not know what would happen with Robert, or how long it would take to find her own place in this life. But she knew one thing. She had discovered someone who truly cared for her. Someone willing to wait for her heart without demanding it. And with that thought, she drifted into sleep, a small but powerful sense of peace settling over her, ready to face whatever the next day might bring. The morning sun broke over the ranch with a soft golden light, spilling across the fields and warming the wooden fences. Amara sat by the window of her room, looking out at the vast expanse of green and gold. The days had grown long, and she had learned more about herself than she ever imagined possible. She still carried fear in her heart, but it was different now, tempered by courage, small victories, and the quiet strength she had discovered in herself. That day felt different. She could sense a change in the air, a subtle shift that whispered of new beginnings. Amara had spent countless hours reflecting on her life, thinking about the choices she had been forced into, and realizing something important. Her happiness and freedom could no longer wait for the approval of others. It was time to stand up for herself. She dressed carefully, selecting a soft green dress that matched the fields outside. It was simple, yet it made her feel grounded, connected to the earth and to herself. As she stepped outside, she saw Jackson tending to the horses in the early morning light. He looked up, and his face broke into that familiar calm smile. "Good morning, Miss Amara," he greeted softly.
Amara returned the smile, but it was different this time, stronger, steadier. "Good morning, Jackson," she replied, her voice carrying a new determination.
Jackson noticed the change immediately. There was confidence in the way she walked, a quiet resolve in her eyes. He said nothing, only nodded, knowing that sometimes words were unnecessary. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Amara attended to the animals, helped in the garden, and completed household tasks with a sense of purpose. Everything she did felt deliberate, chosen rather than forced upon her. Each small act reminded her of her ability to control her own life, and the feeling was exhilarating. By afternoon, it was time to speak to her family and Robert Miller about her decision. Her heart thudded in her chest, a mixture of fear and resolve. She knew that standing up for herself would not be easy. It would require courage, honesty, and a willingness to face disapproval, but she had learned that her happiness depended on it. Jackson walked with her to the main house, his presence steadying her. "You are ready," he said softly. "I'll be with you every step of the way." Amara nodded, drawing strength from his calm assurance. She walked inside, her steps firm, her gaze steady. She found Robert in the study, reviewing papers as he always did. His expression shifted slightly when he saw her approach, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Amara," he said, his tone polite but cautious. "Is something wrong?" Amara took a deep breath. "I need to speak honestly," she said. "I cannot continue in this arrangement. I cannot live a life that was chosen for me without my consent. I deserve the right to make my own choices, to live freely, and to follow my heart." Robert's face darkened slightly, but Amara held her ground. She felt a sense of clarity and strength she had never known before. She continued, "I will not stay out of fear or obligation. This is my life, and I will not surrender it to anyone else's expectations." Her words hung in the air. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Robert spoke, his tone softer than she expected. "I see," he said slowly. "It seems I misjudged your feelings. I cannot force someone to remain where they are not willing to be. You have made your position clear." Amara felt a wave of relief. The tension she had carried for weeks began to lift. She had spoken her truth, and it had been heard. She realized that her courage had opened a door she had feared would remain closed forever. Her parents arrived shortly after, summoned by the discussion. Their faces reflected surprise and concern, but also a growing understanding. Amara explained her feelings carefully, expressing gratitude for their care but asserting her need for independence and choice. Her father's eyes softened, and her mother's hand trembled slightly as she held Amara's. "You are right, my dear," her father said finally. "We have wanted the best for you, but we see now that the best must also be what you choose for yourself." Her mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. We only want you to be happy, Amara. If this is the path you choose, then we will support you." The relief and warmth Amara felt were profound. For the first time in her life, she felt entirely in control of her own destiny. The fear that had haunted her for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet, steady confidence. Jackson stood nearby, observing with a soft smile. When Amara turned to him, he stepped forward, offering his hand. "Are you ready to take the next step?" he asked gently. Amara grasped his hand, feeling the strength and warmth of his presence.
"Yes," she said firmly. The days that followed were filled with adjustments.
Amara began to participate more actively in life at the ranch, not out of obligation but by choice. She learned new skills, spent time with the animals, and explored the fields with a sense of wonder. Each moment reinforced the truth she had discovered. Life could be both beautiful and fulfilling when she followed her own heart. Jackson remained a constant companion, his patience unwavering. They worked together in the mornings, walked the trails in the evenings, and shared quiet conversations beneath the wide-open sky. The bond between them grew steadily, built on trust, respect, and the deep understanding that love could not be forced. It had to be nurtured and allowed to flourish naturally. One afternoon, as they sat by the pond watching the sunlight dance on the water, Jackson spoke softly. "You have come so far, Amara. I am proud of you. You have claimed your life, and your courage inspires me." Amara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I could not have done it without you, Jackson. You gave me patience, understanding, and the space to find myself." He took her hand gently, his eyes meeting hers. "I waited for your heart," he said softly. "And now that you are ready, I hope you will let me walk beside you, not to guide you, but to share this journey with you."
Amara's heart swelled with emotion.
She realized that love did not have to be hurried or forced. It could grow slowly, patiently, and beautifully, just as Jackson had shown her. She nodded, squeezing his hand in return. "I want that," she said. "I want to share this journey with you." The weeks passed with a sense of harmony. Amara embraced her freedom, learning to make decisions confidently and discovering joys she had never known. She explored the ranch with curiosity, tried new tasks, and celebrated small victories, each one reinforcing her independence. The Miller family adjusted as well. Robert respected her decision, allowing her to live freely without interference. Her parents visited occasionally, their pride and relief evident in their smiles. The household settled into a new rhythm, one that respected Amara's autonomy while allowing her to feel connected to those around her. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, casting the fields in shades of gold and amber, Amara and Jackson walked together along the trail they had walked countless times. The air was warm, carrying the scent of grass and earth, and the sky stretched endlessly above them. Jackson stopped and turned to her, his expression tender. "Amara, I want you to know something. Waiting for your heart was not just patience. It was hope. Hope that you would find your own strength and your own voice. And now that you have, I am honored to be here with you." Amara felt tears of gratitude well in her eyes. "You've given me so much," she whispered. "Hope, courage, and the understanding that love can wait and grow. I am thankful for you every day." Jackson smiled softly, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I waited, and it was worth every moment. Now we can face the future together, freely, as equals." The evening faded into night, and the stars appeared one by one, twinkling above the ranch. Amara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She had faced her fears, spoken her truth, and claimed her freedom. And she had discovered love, not the rushed, forced kind, but the patient, respectful love that grew naturally, nurtured by understanding and trust. As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand, Amara felt the full weight of her journey, the fear, the doubt, the courage, and finally the hope and joy. She realized that life was not about being trapped by expectations, but about choosing her path and embracing it fully. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. "I waited for your heart," he whispered once more. a promise fulfilled. Amara smiled, feeling her heart full for the first time in her life. "And I am ready," she said softly. "Ready to live, to love, and to be free." Under the wide open sky, with the fields stretching endlessly around them, Amara felt a sense of belonging she had never known. She was no longer the frightened girl who had arrived at the ranch months ago. She was a woman who had found her voice, claimed her freedom, and discovered the power of patience, trust, and love. And as she walked beside Jackson, the cowboy who had waited for her heart, she knew that this was only the beginning of a beautiful life, one she had chosen for herself, full of hope, strength, and love that had grown naturally, gently, and fully. For the first time, Amara felt entirely free.